lines composed a few miles above Tinton Abbey, right? Okay. So today we are starting Wordsworth officially, and romantic poetry. We're looking at poetry by William Wordsworth. So we are starting with, Dorothy Wordsworth also has some poetry in this volume, but this is volume E of the Norton Anthology of World Literature. And I want to hold this right in front of the camera so everybody can see. It is volume E, and it is the Norton Anthology of World Literature, volume E, and we're looking at William Wordsworth, not Dorothy. Thank you, not Dorothy. We're starting with lines composed a few miles above Tinton Abbey. And before we go very far with that, what I do want to talk about a little bit is romantic poetry in general. Okay? I want to talk a little bit about romantic poetry in general, because we don't want to confuse romantic poetry with romance, as in fallen in love. And so I want us to think about what's going on in the poem and what's going on in the poetry. For instance, if you go back and look at The Rape of the Lock, it was all kind of, what was going on was all out there. It was about Belinda and the Baron and the lock of hair and the sylphs. It's all out there, right? When we read Blake, The Lamb and the Tiger, where was all of that?
In our head.
In your head, yes. So your understand, it's the I, as in this kind of I, me, myself, and I, the I. So the understanding of the poem is very dependent on, or the meaning is very dependent on the individual. Okay? Does that? Pardon?
Like feelings.
Feelings, yes. And actually, we're going to need to pause that for just a second, because. Okay. So if we think about romantic poetry, and we looked at some of the differences between neoclassical poetry and the Age of Reason and Romanticism, but let's kind of just recap some of those things that are particular to romantic poetry. Now, you know, you can read, I mean, there are poems from the neoclassical age. There would be love poems. There are poems from the Romantic age or era that could be about love. But when I ask you on the test, what is the difference between romantic poetry and neoclassical poetry? Do not say that romantic poetry is about being in love. No, it is not about being in love. It's not about Valentine's Day, although Valentine's Day is this week. Okay, so that's not what romantic poetry is about. Okay. Instead, it is romantic, really, like romantic languages, romance languages are languages that are Latin-based. They came from Rome. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So French, Italian, Spanish, those are languages that originated from Rome. Okay, and so it's not about romance as in falling in love. But anyhow, romantic poetry is going to be focused on I, the individual, feelings, emotions. As we said last time, this is the era of democracy, when democracy is coming into being, it's returning. Although the ancient Greeks had it, but it's coming back into force. So if you have democracy, you have the people, right? All of the people. The idea of equality. the celebration of the common man, his experiences, and common things. Common things, common life. So we can get the celebration of the farmer, we can get the celebration of the worker, we can get the celebration of a flower or something like that. Now we're also looking at, we didn't really have lyric poems that we looked at before. Now we have, because it's the celebration of just one little thing, right? Common man, common experiences, common things, common life, those sorts of things. If you're celebrating that, finding, it's very, I use country music for everything, and I apologize for that, but if you think about, like, I Saw God Today, there's that song that I saw God today in a flower, in the face of a baby, things like that. You can find God in the common things. Now, to celebrate one experience of God or the transcendent in one common everyday thing, it's appropriate that this era has lots of lyric poetry, okay? Okay, and here's where I start really getting off track with the schedule, because I realize that you really need to start thinking about what is lyric poetry. If we get behind, don't worry. It's better that you know about all this stuff rather than try to read the poetry and be lost. I'm going to move this out. Lyric poetry. When you were in high school, what did you think that lyric poetry was about?
Words.
Words.
Songs.
Songs. Good. Songs. Because songs have lyrics. Yeah. It's the same thing. If you listen to music on the radio where they sing, you are familiar with lyric poetry. You really are. Everybody, it's kind of like, oh, you read poetry? Well, everybody listens to poetry every day in their car pretty much, right? The lyric poem is the celebration of one moment. Okay? It's the celebration of one moment, as opposed to an epic that has a long drawn-out plot. And I do want you to know this as well. Okay, let's think about the kinds of literature that we read here at the University of Mobile. In English 101 and 102, you tended to read what? Epics, yes. Okay, I'm going to draw a circle. You read epics. Okay. And then we've got lyrics that we're going to study right now. What other kinds of literature are there? What did you read in 201? Ancient Greek. Did you read Oedipus? Antigone? I tend to come in two kinds, right? Some of them are tragic, so you've got tragedies. And you have, what's the opposite of tragedy?
Comedy.
A comedy, yes. Now, you've got tragedies, and according to Aristotle, this is just one way of kind of figuring out what different kinds of literature do different, why they do different things and how they work. It's not pure. We don't have ballads up here. We don't have novels and short stories up here. But it's not pure. Even Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey contains lyric moments, and the Romantic era tends to produce lyrics. But Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey is a little long to be considered a lyric. It's not one moment he's reflecting. But it will help us to think about what the lyric does by contrasting it with, say, tragedy. A guy named Aristotle, ancient Greece, defined tragedy as having a plot And so it's got movement. Tragedies have plot. You can't have tragedy if you don't have a movement that takes place, right? You start with a pretty good guy. You start with your tragic hero, who is above average. He makes a mistake. He falls and has a reversal of fortune. Okay, you don't need to know all of this. You don't need to know all these little things in here, but you need to know that it's a downward motion, okay? Because, I mean, think about it. You wouldn't want, for a tragic, it would not be tragic for a criminal to make a mistake and wind up in jail, because, that's justice, right? Instead, it's a good guy. Somebody like a king or a president or somebody like that makes a mistake. He's a good guy, but he makes a mistake. He's trying to do the right thing like Oedipus, but he makes a mistake, he falls, and he has a reversal of fortune. So everything was good in the beginning, and it's lousy at the end, okay? If it winds up happy at the end, it's comedy, okay? So you have a plot. Tragedies have plots. There's a downward movement because everything goes bad, right? Now, here we are. We're all just miserable and kind of goofy, right? And we kind of recognize our humanity. Now that we're kind of down there in the ordinary world, and if you kind of think about what kind of guy is a comic hero, I always think Jim Carrey, right? Because he's so goofy and strange and everything. So you've got these kind of people that are like us, or even funnier than we are. Like, you know, we can laugh at them, but we're also laughing at ourselves. They're usually in a bad situation. In Shakespeare, usually there are two people who are in love that aren't supposed to get married for some reason. And so in the comic world, everything starts out bad, and by the end, the guy gets the girl, they can get married and all of that. Shakespeare is very careful about the way he does this. He doesn't have them have the wedding. There's usually not a wedding very often there's not a wedding in the play. Tragedy happens in the world of law, because how can you have somebody fall if you don't have rules? If you don't have rules, there is no fall. There is no sin without saying this is right and this is wrong. If there's not something wrong, then you can't fall. You're just there. So tragedy happens in the city, in the rule of law. You fall, you go out into the green world for Shakespeare. It happens outside. I mean, think about where all of the comedies happen. Midsummer Night's Dream is out there in the woods with fairies and sprites and whatever those creatures are that are mystical and imaginary. It happens in the woods where there's no law. If you had the wedding happen in the play, it would be the rule of law being imposed. And then something would always go wrong, inevitably. But instead, they don't get married, but we know they will. Okay? So then comedy has an upward movement to it. Comedy moves upward to epics. Epics also tend to have an upward movement in their meaning, even if it's a tragic epic like the Iliad. Because there's some kind of an establishment of order, or a reimagining of the way that order should happen or should be. Homer wants the Greeks to reimagine themselves so that you don't have every little city-state fighting against Athens is going to fight against Sparta, is going to fight against Ithaca, is going to fight against Mycenae. There's this sense in which, the way I read it, it's like a thinking of how the Greeks should work together. So there's an establishment, or it is a founding. Odysseus has to, F-O-U, that looks like a C for some reason, founding. Yeah. A founding of a new order. Aeneas founds Rome. He establishes Rome. Odysseus learns how to behave like a civilized human being before he goes home, that sort of thing. So you've got an upward movement. You still have plot. Now, if you only have one moment occurring, you only have one moment, you can't have things change, right? If you go, my peacock cup is in celebration of Flannery O'Connor, so we'll read Flannery O'Connor later. But anyhow, if I go, oh, what beautiful feathers. Even if I go, oh, what beautiful feathers for 14 lines, has there been any change? No, I've just gone beautiful for 14 lines, right? I mean, it's kind of weird, but I just go beautiful, right? There's no plot. The peacock did not molt. Didn't die. Didn't grow up and become a heroic peacock or anything. It's just, yay, peacock, you're beautiful, right? Okay, one moment. See what you missed out on last semester? Okay, so anyhow, the lyric is the only thing that has no plot, no movement, okay? You'll notice I've got arrows all over the place here. Arrows for plot, movement. Lyrics don't have plots. Lyrics don't have movement. Think about, I apologize to everyone who doesn't like country music, but this is the best way that I can teach this, that I found. You are familiar with lyric poetry, whether you know it or not. You are inundated with it every day. Even if you don't like country music, you are inundated with it. Okay, tell me something about, what are country songs about?
Love and people drinking.
Love and drinking, pretty much. Okay, so tell me about love. Tell me about a country song or some other kind of song about love.
Just a specific country song?
Yes.
Is Taylor Swift country?
Yeah.
Love Story?
Love Story. What's that one about? Oh, Romeo and Juliet. Okay. Love Story. Now that one's almost a ballad. It's got a story to it. Love Story. It has a story to it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's kind of a
Yeah,
ballad.
that's kind of moving.
But that works. Okay. So we can say, what is it about?
Megan, what's that song about?
She can't talk. She's got laryngitis. Love Story, Taylor Swift, the one about Romeo and Juliet. Is it all about how he jilted her? Meaning he threw her away, right? Doesn't want to marry. No. Is it about the wedding?
No.
Not really.
It's more of like, just from her perspective, how like she loves him and he won't like step up and take a stand for anything, and like, I don't know. By the end of the song, it's just like I'll ask her to marry him, but it's like the whole song. It's just like,
The whole song is, when's he ever gonna come ask me? Or when are we gonna run away together? Or okay. So it's kind of anticipation, right? There's this anticipation. Okay. So we've got love story. We've got anticipation. Okay. What's another kind of, I dug my key into the side of his pretty little souped-up four-wheel drive, and I carved my name into his leather seats, right? What's that one about? What? Revenge, right? Again, because you're mad at him, right? Okay. So what is that one called? I don't know.
Before he cheats.
Before he cheats, yes. Okay. Next time you'll think before he cheats. Yes. Okay, so that one's about revenge or anger. Okay. What else? We've got I've got nothing.
I can't really think of a country song that's not a story. Not like a love song that's not a story.
Well, okay. Before he cheats, is there a story to that one? Or is it one moment?
I don't know. I feel like there's a plot to it.
It's a story. He talks about how she's in the bar and what they're probably doing right now.
What leads up to the events of her like taking all her anger out on his vehicle?
Okay, do we get the story of when they were falling in love? We don't know when they fell in love.
So it doesn't.
We don't get the anticipation, right?
Because she's saying, I dug my key, like she had already done it.
I dug my key. So it's all in this moment of it. The whole story celebrates her anger, right, and revenge. Okay, and that's kind of the thing. We want that moment of one kind of emotion almost, right? Revenge, anger, something like that. Or love story. I mean, this one is close because it's like it's got the wedding. I mean, he agrees to get married at the end. I mean, it's like they're going to get married at the end. But almost the whole thing is the anticipation, right? How about my front porch looking in? Do y'all know my front porch looking in?
Rascal Flats.
No.
I don't know.
Or no, it's Lone Star.
Lone Star.
Lone Star, my front porch looking in. What does he see?
His children.
Pardon?
His children.
His children and his wife, right? Now, why is he looking in instead of looking
I
out?
don't remember that.
What?
Didn't they get a divorce or something? Is that the song? And
No,
he was
no, no,
watching
no.
his family.
No.
No.
He's looking.
I don't ever listen to country music, but I thought.
Just became a
No,
tragedy.
that's just that little girl. She's got, I guess she got radio, she says Carrot Top.
She's outside
Yeah.
playing. She's outside playing in the yard. He's inside, and she's about to come in, and she's looking through the window.
Well, he's just talking
No,
about
he's
their
looking-
daily life and what they
He's
do.
looking inside the house.
I don't know.
He's
They're
looking
bo-
inside the screen.
Actually,
Yeah,
they're
he
both
comes up with-
outside, and they're.
He's just looking at his family and admiring them.
He's looking at his family and admiring them, yes. And he's got a wife and 2 kids, and so he's admiring his wife and kids. And does it tell us about when he wanted to get married?
No.
Does it tell us about the divorce or whatever, or the leaky roof? No. It just tells us how he is. It's a moment of, you could call it a moment of consummation, okay? Because it is a fulfillment that he's happy at that point. Okay, you'll see why I'm using consummation. Anticipate, it rhymes. Anticipation, consummation, and then this one would be lamentation. Okay. Now, also for the record, yes, I realize that I'm using all songs about people falling in love. It's okay. We're going to move from there in a minute. Okay. So we've got love story. This is the I wish he would ask me out stage. Okay. This one is, yay, we're married and I'm still happy, even though he's got 2 kids that are at an age that they would keep everybody awake all night. But anyhow, it's nice. And then before he cheats, or what was the old one that, golly, this is almost 20 years old now, but blame it on his lying, cheating, cold, dead beating, 2-time double dealing, mean, mistreating, love and heart. That was an old one, but it's like, I remember all the words to the mean ones. This is kind of telling you something, but before he cheats is the anger. Now this is about people being in love with each other, like romantic love. But this is the same sort of thing. You get a lyric poem about anticipation. There's not unity. There's not fulfillment. Then there's that point with unity and fulfillment. Then there's the loss of that unity with the beloved, whatever that is. Now, it could be a person. You are also, as students here at the University of Mobile, you should have an advantage over students from other places. Think about, there are 150 or 51, depending on which translation you use, of these that you would probably be very familiar with, that you've been reading ever since you were real little.
Psalms.
Psalms, yes. The Psalms. Anticipation of when you are going, how long, O Lord, how long, right? Or, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Or, this is the day the Lord has made, I shall be glad and rejoice in it, right? And then, lamentation, I mean, I tend not to read those Psalms because I'm usually trying to find one that's consoling. But there are some, such as, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land when they are in exile? You know, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? They can't sing because they've been in exile and they miss God and all of that. So, you can talk about unity with the beloved in terms of human love and unity with God. There are psalms of anticipation, consummation when we've got unity with God and we're just praising Him, and then lamentation when the Israelites have done something and become exiled. Human love God, and then now we are into the Romantic era when we've come through the age of reason, and we're now in the Enlightenment and all of that. And wow, it's kind of like science has sort of made us not think about God, because we don't have empirical truth about God. We can't weigh Him, touch Him. We don't see Him typically. If you walked in the room and said howdy, we'd be kind of going, what? Right? If you saw Him, if you could feel Him, if you could weigh Him, if you could physically hear Him, if you heard His voice booming, kind of be different. Has anybody had that happen? No? Yeah. We typically don't have empirical, verifiable, scientific evidence of encountering God, right? Does that make sense? Okay. The Age of Reason and the Enlightenment says if you can't get that, if you can't get physical evidence of it, you really can't talk about it. And so God kind of gets pushed to the background. And so now we're looking for something, an encounter with the sublime. And I will give you a definition of the sublime soon. We're looking for an encounter with the transcendent, meaning that which is, something that transcends, rises above. And sometimes we're going to find this in terms of unity with God, and then this kind of, with Wordsworth too. There's a sense of unity with nature might give us some kind of a sense of unity with God, okay? Because they're looking for something spiritual like God, okay? Because the Age of Reason's kind of rationalized God out of the picture to a certain extent. Okay, so we have lyrics are the celebration of one moment. There is no movement, M-O-V-E-M-E-N-T, no movement. And there are three kinds of lyrics. We have lyrics of anticipation, consummation, and lamentation. This is a C. Three connotation. These are the three kinds of lyrics. I'm going to erase some stuff so that those on the test. I'm learning in my old age to try to focus on the stuff just to make sure that you get the stuff. The lyric poem is the celebration of one moment. It has no movement, unlike tragedies, comedies, and epics. For the test, you need to know this genre wheel. This is called a genre, G-E-N-R-E, wheel. It is one way of understanding different kinds of literature. It's not the only way, but it's one way that gives us a way of talking about things. Lyric poems, celebration of one moment. There's no movement, and there are three kinds of lyrics. They are anticipation, consummation, and lamentation. I might give you lines from a lyric and say, what kind of poem is this, or what kind of song would this be, okay? You need to know the movement, you need to know the different kinds of the different genres. I don't need to know the word founding. And you need to know there are no arrows up here around lyric, just that there are three kinds. Okay. I'll give everybody a little bit of time for that to sink in. And no, you do not have to know country songs. Okay, so we're now looking for unity with the beloved, which could be human love, God, nature, something else. And we've got time to at least start on lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey. Okay. Page 792 in volume E. And we've got 5 years have passed, 5 summers, with the length of 5 long winters, and again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. Period. I'll read that again, and I want you to pay attention to when I pause and when I don't pause. 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters, and again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. Period. You will notice that I did not stop at the end of the line. Okay? When you're reading poetry, I mean, we're doing lots of poetry for a little while here, and you want to pay attention to the fact that you don't have to stop at the end of the line. You might also look at the ends, look at the end, the last words. Length, here, springs, again, cliffs, impress, connect, sky, repose, view. Does it rhyme? No. We are no longer in the land of Alexander Pope, and everything's got to have that rigid structure and all of that. This is more free-flowing. It's romantic, right? It's just like, let your emotions go. We're not worried about those heroic couplets. We're not worried about that strict rhyme scheme. Our thoughts, the complete thoughts, don't have to end every 2 lines, right? Now, also, let's just talk about what do the words mean then, okay? Let's just look at what the words mean. Okay, am I here, or is it okay? All right. Okay, 5 years of lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey on revisiting the banks of the Wye during a tour July 13th, 1798. Just curious here. What is this, 5 years have passed? What's going on?
It's been 5 years since he's been wherever he is.
It's been 5 years since he's been here. He was there 5 years ago, and now he's back, okay? Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs that on a wild, secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky.
Sounds like he's going for some solitude.
He's going for some solitude, okay? The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season, with their unripe fruits, are clad in one green hue and lose themselves mid groves and copses. Okay, what's going on there?
He just came back there and he's talking about how it looks different.
Yeah, he's just saying, well, this is what it looks like. I'm sitting here under a sycamore tree and how it looks a little different, and he's there in the country, okay? At this point, that's good, okay? Don't go too far with it. Once again, I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild. These pastoral farm, by the way, what does pastoral mean?
Countryside.
Thank you, yes. We will get to another pastoral in Keats, and I've had very odd interpretations about, had people think that pastoral had to do with preachers, and that the guy had a bad experience with his preacher or something. I'm like, no, it just means they're in the country. So he says, once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms, green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice, as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave, where by his fire the hermit sits alone. Okay, so he's in the country, looking at some nice little country farms. how is this different from the rape of the lock?
There's no real, it's not exactly super deep. There's not really any like commentary
Oh,
going on.
stories.
It's just observation for the most part.
Just observation,
It's not a story.
it's not a story, no movement. He's just saying, look at the beautiful countryside, right? That's kind of all there is to it.
Yeah,
Pardon?
I would agree.
Oh, okay. So it's just very pleasant. It's just kind of a pleasant experience of nature at this point, right? Okay. Now, he does talk about, and you might want to look at lines 5, 6, 7, thoughts of more deep seclusion, this wild, secluded scene, and thoughts of more, just kind of mark that, and we'll come back to it. It's also not somebody's fancy drawing room where the people of the court are coming. Everybody is coming here. I mean, it's like there's a hermit. It's a little bit mystical, you know, there could be a hermit living in the woods. I don't know, maybe we'll find the little people or something. That's next month, that's St. Patrick's Day. But okay, now, here's the next thing here. He says, these beauteous forms. Heidi, what are the beauteous forms?
I don't know.
Just like looking back on what he just saw.
Yeah, these beauteous forms. The pretty farm, the nice sycamore tree, all the scenery. These beauteous forms, right? Okay. Through a long absence. How long was the absence? 5 years. Okay, so he's been gone for 5 years. Have not been to me, as is a landscape to a blind man's eye. Okay, what's a landscape? Scenery.
What you see, I mean, like,
Okay.
sorry, landscape can really be.
Landscape is whatever you're looking at out there. What would a landscape be to a blind man's eye? Nothing, exactly. Now he says, these beauteous forms, the tree, the farm, blah, 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 have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye. Why not?
So he hasn't been there?
He was there 5 years ago.
Because he appreciates the beauty versus the blind man can't see it, so he can't appreciate it.
Yes, he can still appreciate the beauty, but wait, he was gone for 5 years. How does he appreciate the... Yes, okay, translate for her because she can't talk.
He remembers it.
He remembers it, exactly. He's been gone for 5 years, but the beauteous forms have not been like a landscape to a blind man's eye because he spent those 5 years remembering it, okay? He could remember it even when, okay, oft in lonely rooms, this is next line, 25, but oft in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities, din, D-I-N, the noise of towns and cities, I have owed to them, his memories, the beauteous forms, in hours of weariness, sensations sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart. We're going to stop right there for right now. Okay. He could still remember the beauteous forms. He could still remember the image of the countryside. I'm going to now give you the definition of poetry for Wordsworth, and I want you to write this down and learn it by heart, okay? Wordsworth's definition of poetry is, okay, this is poetry, and it's Wordsworth's definition. It is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Okay, and that's what he's talking about in the poem here. Okay, when we talk about it's recollected. So there were feelings that he had when he went there to begin with 5 years ago. And then, have y'all seen a movie? I think the movie, it's called Collateral. I've actually got it. Have y'all seen Collateral? Okay. There's this guy that drives a cab, and he goes everywhere in the cab and everything, but if you're having a bad day, he apparently had been to some beautiful island for vacation, and on his visor, he's got a postcard, right? And he looks at the postcard of the beach, right?
Is that right?
That's what it is. It's those feelings. You can go back to that place, right? You can go back to that place and recollect or remember. So this is what memory is important. Memory is important for the romantics because they take that spot of time. This is also important. Spots of time. They take a spot of time, one moment where they experienced something. They experienced something and then put it in your memory. And it's the same sort of thing like when you're having a really bad day. You can go back and remember someplace where you were happy or peaceful, or if you are just sick to pieces of whatever it is you're doing today, remember what your boyfriend or your girlfriend gave you for Valentine's Day yesterday and it'll cheer you up or whatever. So when it happened originally, it's a spot of time. And then you go home and you're back at work and you're standing there at the Walmart cash register or whatever, and you recollect, you remember those powerful feelings, you remember them, and it's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility that then he can go back to the city and he can remember what he experienced 5 years ago. Now, it's going to take us beyond, though, just that memory, because he's going to say that he's going to talk about unremembered pleasure as well, and we'll have to stop now. So, we will talk about this one and Ode on Intimations of Immortality on Monday. Your post for this week will be on Blake, and I'm just going to ask you to reflect on that whole business of who the three makers of the tiger are. Who are the three makers of the tiger? Remember Blake, God, and it's in your mind, and maybe how that reflects on romanticism. So for the online folks, the post is due Sunday at 11:55 p.m. and I'll just make it due for everybody then. That is easy. So
Wait, I'm sorry, what's the question that we need to answer?
okay, and I'll put it up first. But it is, think about Blake and who made the tiger. There are three makers of the tiger. God, of course, but I mean, Blake is not saying God made the tiger in the sense that we would say that because he's not a Christian. But
Like in our mind?
but Blake made it in the poem, and then each one of us has a different tiger. So he could say God because he's kind of you could say God because he's referencing the lamb, and so all of that. So it's God in a weird way for Blake, and then the poet Blake makes the tiger, and then we make each one of us makes the tiger. I'll ask you to talk about that and how that's different from what Pope would say, Alexander Pope, because he's just going to say, it's just one way and that's it. We may not understand it, but it's the way it is, that kind of thing.
It's due Sunday?
Sunday, yes. Okay, thank you.
No class Friday.
No class on Friday, no.